What will happen to travelers without a real ID after May 7th? New rule for domestic U.S. travel explained. With the May 7th, 2025 enforcement date fast approaching, millions of Americans are being urged to take action or risk serious travel disruptions. The Real ID Act, passed nearly 2 decades ago as a post 9/11 security measure, is finally set to be enforced nationwide. This means that without a compliant ID, Americans could be turned away at airport security when trying to board domestic flights. Here's everything you need to know about what Real ID is, why it's being implemented now, and how you can make sure you're ready before the deadline hits. If you are interested in this, please pay attention and watch the video through to the end to get all the information. Please hit like and subscribe, and don't forget to push the notification bell for an upcoming video. As the May 7, 2025 deadline looms, millions of Americans are now under pressure to upgrade their driver's licenses or identification cards to meet Real ID's standard, a move that, if ignored, could bar them from boarding domestic flights across the United States. The updated ID requirement stems from a post-9/11 law, and despite years of delays, enforcement is finally set to begin. The Real ID mandate. The Real ID Act, signed into law in 2005 by then-President George W. Bush, was introduced as a national security measure after the 9/11 Commission highlighted vulnerabilities in how state-issued IDs were being obtained. The law requires stricter documentation to prove legal status, identity, and residence before a state can issue a federally recognized ID. From May 7th onwards, the Transportation Security Administration will no longer accept licenses that lack the distinctive star marking, which signifies compliance with Real ID requirements. Travelers without a compliant ID must instead carry a valid passport, permanent resident card, military ID, or an enhanced license issued in select states, as per a report by Fox News. New rules at U.S. airports. Although the Department of Homeland Security has announced a phased enforcement approach, officials confirm that anyone lacking Real ID compliant documentation may be turned away at airport security. The TSA has signaled potential for a 2-year adjustment period, during which passengers may face heightened screening or receive warnings rather than being denied boarding outright. Real ID will also become mandatory for accessing other federal facilities and nuclear power plants, adding to the urgency for compliance. However, critics argue that the rule raises questions about personal privacy and federal overreach, application process, and documentation requirements. To obtain a Real ID, individuals must visit their local Department of Motor Vehicles and provide documents verifying their full legal name, date of birth, social security number, and lawful residency status. 2 separate documents are also required to confirm state residency, such as utility bills or bank statements, as per the Fox News report. In some states, individuals who recently renewed their licenses may already possess a Real ID compliant card identifiable by a star in the upper corner. Those uncertain of their status are advised to verify with their local DMV. Political pushback and public reaction. The implementation has not gone without controversy. While originally passed under President Bush, the Real ID law has seen bipartisan delays, including during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, as enforcement draws near, conservative voices are questioning why it must be applied now. Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky voiced concern over civil liberties, arguing that Real ID creates a serious risk to freedom without providing meaningful security benefits. Former vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin added her criticism, questioning the urgency of the rollout under the current administration. Still, others, including Republican Representative Mark Alford, insist it's time to comply. This law passed 20 years ago. It's time to stop dragging feet and get to the DMV, he said in a public statement, a shift in government enforcement approach. Unlike the legal and political battle surrounding Obamacare, which continues to face challenges even around preventive services like cancer screening, the Real ID law is now progressing toward full implementation with relatively little resistance from federal authorities. According to TSA officials, the goal is to improve national security by making it harder to forge IDs, a strategy they argue is as vital as preventive health measures embedded in Obamacare. With enforcement now scheduled and agencies aligned, Americans are urged not to wait until the final hour. For those planning to fly after May 7th, the advice is clear. Check your ID status now or risk missing your flight. FAQs. What is the Real ID and why is it required? The Real ID is a federally approved form of identification designed to enhance national security. It was mandated by the Real ID Act of 2005 following the 9/11 attacks to strengthen the process for issuing state IDs and driver's licenses. When does the Real ID requirement go into effect? The enforcement of Real ID begins on May 7, 2025. From that date forward, passengers must present a Real ID-compliant form of identification to board domestic flights or access certain federal facilities. As the Real ID deadline draws near, the time to act is now. Whether you're planning a business trip, vacation, or simply want to avoid last-minute hassles, verify your ID status today can save you from major headaches down the road. While debates about privacy and government oversight continue, one fact remains. Without a compliant ID after May 7, 2025, you could be grounded. Don't wait until the final hour to visit your local DMV. Gather your documents and ensure you're ready for takeoff. That is all for today in this video. What are your thoughts on this? Please let us know in the comments section below. Thanks for watching the entire video. Hopefully, the information is useful to you. See you later in the next video. Till then, take.
What will happen to travelers without a real ID after May 7th? New rules for domestic US travel explained. As the May 7, 2025 deadline approaches, millions of Americans face the urgent need to upgrade their driver's license or identification cards to meet the federal Real ID requirements. This mandate, a post-9/11 national security measures enacted in 2005 under President George W. Bush, aims to enhance the integrity of state-issued IDs. Beginning on that date, the Transportation Security Administration will no longer accept non-compliant IDs for domestic air travel. Travelers without a real ID must instead present alternative documentation such as a valid passport, permanent resident card, or military ID. Real ID compliant cards feature a star marking and require applicant to provide proof of full legal name, date of birth, social security number, lawful status, and state residency, typically verified through documents like utility bills or bank statements. Applications must be submitted in person at local Department of Motor Vehicles. Some individuals who recently renewed their license may already possess compliant IDs, but verification is advised. That's all. Hello, 1, 2, 3. But verification is advised. The Department of Homeland Security has indicated a phased enforcement strategy, potentially including a 2-year adjustment period will increase screening or warning, rather than outright denial at security checkpoints. Compliance will also be necessary to assess certain federal facilities and nuclear power plants abroad. The mandates reach beyond airports. Despite bipartisan delays, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, law is now moving forward. Critics argue that it rule in fingers on our civil liberties and expanding federal oversight. Representatives Thomas Massie of Kentucky and a former vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin have a voice concern over privacy and timing. Nonetheless, other lawmakers like Representative Mark Alford insist it's a time for Americans to comply, emphasizing the low 20 years history. Unlike other continuous federal policies such as Obamacare, Real ID is now being implemented with a little opposition from federal agencies. TSA maintains that the goal is to strengthen national security by preventing the use of fraudulent IDs and effort deep is essential as a preventive health policies. With full enforcement imminent, travelers are asked to confirm whether their ID meets the Real ID standards. Those who delay may risk being turned away at airport security after May 7, 2025. The message is clear: check your ID status or is missing your flight.